Okay, so let's look at porn stats. And I want to talk about this because everywhere I go to teach, this is the number one problem everybody's facing. It is an epidemic in our society and around the world. Okay, um, most pastors I talk to, this is what they're dealing with. They don't have a clue on how to help people with it. Um, it's like looking at the ocean. It's like an undercurrent or undertow. Everything looks okay on the surface, but you go in there and it's going to suck you. Going to suck you out. Okay, so 40 million American are porn users. You know, you can look at this thing. You know, pause the video and look at it. I don't want to go into. You know, the porn industry annual revenue is more than NFL, NBA, and in the baseball league combined. It has more revenue than ABC, NBC, Netflix, and Amazon combined. That's how huge it is. Billions and billions of dollars on this kind of thing. And right now, with the loneliness and all of the COVID virus, you know, porn activity is just raised by hundreds of percentages. You know, because people are bored, they're lonely, and are trying to fill the empty place. Okay? So, 47% of families report that pornography is a problem in their home, and that's Christian families. Okay. Okay. Increases infidelity, 68% of church-going men and over 50% of pastors view porn on a regular basis. Young Christians and adults, 18 to 24, 76% have an activity on porn searches on a regular basis. Okay? 33% of women under 25 search for porn at least once a month. And these last ones, these are Christians, okay? And porn didn't used to be a big problem for women. So it's something I've been researching and talking to women and finding out what the hole is it filling, you know? Because men are stimulated visually, women are stimulated emotionally, see? So porn never really turned them on before. But I know one of the things that the younger women I've talked to and why they're looking at porn, they're looking at as an instructional thing. Oh, that's what he likes. That's what he needs. You know, that's how you do that, you see. And so rather than getting so much aroused themselves, you know, that's where they're getting their sex education. So 13% of self-identified Christian women say they never watch porn, but 87% of Christian women have watched porn. I'll tell you this, a pastor called me from Canada, and he's a pastor near a conservative Christian college up there, and he called me. He says they did a survey there. 100% of the men and 50% of the women had watched porn in the last 2 weeks, and he had no clue on how to help them. You see? What do we do? You know, how do we address this? 57% of pastors say that porn addiction is the most damaging issue in their congregation. Only 7% of pastors say their church has a program to help people struggling with pornography. So why is this, you guys? If this is 75% of the men in church and at least 30 or 40% of the women, are struggling with this, you know, in secret and isolation, and it's destroying the relationships and all sorts of things, okay? That why do Christians have such a hard time talking about sex? You know, and especially young people. You know, I talked to Taylor about this over and over again. You know, so these young people who are struggling with getting their sexual identity and everything, and doing things, you know, and watching things that they shouldn't go. Where do they go for support? Where can they go to process this? Where can they go to get help? Because one of the things when I do these seminars, and I talk about it in much more graphic terms than we're talking about right now, several people say, I'm so uncomfortable with what you're talking about. You know, we're talking about the surgeries that they're having and you know, and all this kinds of stuff, you know, that these kids are struggling with. And I said, that's exactly it. If you're uncomfortable with it, then you're not a safe person, or this is not a safe place for people to come and talk to about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ruth.
So traditionally in the church, there's been a lot of shame around sexuality.
Right.
And a lot of stifling of sexual impulses and all that. So there's not been good training. And then if you have, if you slip up or you do these things that are sinful, then you're encouraged to hide it because it's not usually an environment of confess or you're shamed.
Yeah.
So there's just so much shame with it that I think that's part of why it's such an epidemic.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to, like, we haven't done a good job of addressing that head on. We talked about it. We've talked about it in men's stuff, but I just would want anyone to know that's listening to this, like, there is hope for change. Like, you can help people change that want to break this habit, break this sin, break this thing that they feel shame about. And it usually takes a safe person that it has no power over them anymore, and they can talk about freely, and they've been through something like this process to go that there's hope, and you can have a risk to change, but you got to take some steps and do some work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of the part that makes it churches unsafe is there's no code of ethics in churches.
Say more about that.
Okay, no confidentiality. In regular secular organizations, if you break confidentiality, you share something, about other people or anything, you lose your license, you get sued and all that kind of stuff. But in churches, there's no code of ethics as far as making it safe because of confidentiality. And I've had, if you read my book, the Church Helping or Hurting book, there's story after story about people who became vulnerable, and the next week the whole church knew about it. A good story is this guy was really struggling with pornography, wanted help. He went to the pastor, right? And then his wife lifted him up in prayer at the women's prayer group.
It's always great to just out your husband's stuff, in a prayer request fashion.
Yeah, so that's not gossip. That's, lifting him up in prayer. And the next week, the whole church knew about it, and he was so embarrassed and so ashamed, he never went back to church.
Well, and then it also, what it does is the other guy sitting there that wants to get help and hates the cycle that he's in is going, well, I can't do that.
You see what happened to that guy.
Right. And so that's why I like the environments that we create to have enough grace and truth and time.
Yeah.
And like real change is possible.
Right.
But
it was some of those guys that we started the first Genesis groups out, and we saw a real success with that. Anyway, let's look at some of the effects.
I want us to tackle this. So if this is a thing and this is an issue for us, like, be brave, because there is a vision of a hopeful future for us.
Because bottom line, you guys, we're evangelistic. We want to see people come to the Lord and have their lives changed. Absolutely. Right? But one of my bottom lines is the best evangelism is change life. When people's lives are getting changed and they're getting free of stuff, they get excited about that. And they tell other people about it, And so my goal would be that a church is being so effective with helping people change their lives with this, that other people in the community, when they finally get with the pigs, right, and they would think of that church as where they would want to go, because they hear about other people with the same problem actually changing and getting free, of those things. So
what are you saying with the pigs is a reference to Luke 15, prodigal son, when he had his come to his senses moment, and where do I need to go that's safe? And he goes back home to his father. Yeah. And then Jesus says that's what God is like.
Yeah. Right. And of course, that was God's job. He made them willing to change. So they come to us to make them able to change. So that's a heavy responsibility.
Just say that. Let's just have an all stop on the video. God made them willing to change, and they came to us so they would be able to change.
Right.
And because we've been transformed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, grace and effectiveness, Grace and competency. That's what it takes to make it safe. Nothing else. Otherwise, the limbic system won't let them be vulnerable. Anyway, let's get on here. We're going to be okay. So, effects of porn. Okay, it's the main cause of erectile dysfunction in our country, and the reason is a limbic thing. Is people watch porn, and their limbic system is overstimulated with a fantasy. And of course, one woman can't live up to a fantasy that they're seeing, on these, free pornography everywhere. Okay, See? So it's causing real difficulties in marriages, isn't it? Just because, you know, I can't go into it all, but how the women feel about that, what's wrong with me. I mean, it goes spirals, okay? The earlier the porn experience, the more ingrained it becomes. The average age of first contact with porn is between 8 and 11 years old. What I read the other day, that 97% of young people, okay, under the age of 18 have been affected by porn. See? It's just everywhere. It's just everywhere. But they're getting their sexual identity out of this. The other thing it does, porn tends to objectify women, making sex something you do to women rather than you have with them. See, because in porn there's no relationship. You see, it's just doing it. You see what I mean? And so that's where they're getting their sex education from. See, and that's what they're seeing. And not only that, they're getting it, from TV and movies and stuff. Because in TV, when you watch TV now or movies, okay, if people kiss, they automatically have sex. They kiss and then they have to throw them up against the wall and, just this wild, crazy kinds of thing. So teenagers are afraid, to, have a relationship. Even holding hands, a lot of times they're afraid of it because they don't want to have sex. And they think, and that's what they've been taught. It's everywhere. It's like, a demonic invasion of our self-worth and our minds, okay? And
Michael, if I can, even just on that, I think I've talked to a lot of students that it's not even that they're afraid of it, but it's like, well, we kiss, so I guess this is what we do. And it's just like, this is the next step. And it just seems like it's normal. It's like, well, okay, I guess we kissed or whatever. This is what we do now.
Yeah. So it's in creating this God-given wonderful thing that he gave us, right? And it's distorting it, okay? And I'll tell you that, I mean, we'll talk about demons in a little while, but if there's a main strategy of the enemy to destroy us, our ministry, and our lives, okay, it's isolation. If he can isolate us, he can mess with our minds, our hearts, our soul, and cause us to self-destruct everybody around us. So what a powerful tool this is. So all these things that we're talking about today is things that isolate us and cause us to, self-gratify and self-destruct, to cope with it.
Even the filter language you used earlier, I don't remember the quote, trying to get the right filter, but
Right.
if you've got massive effects of porn, it's also the filter that we're looking at relationship, that
Right.
we're looking at the opposite sex or same sex. It's like it's impacting everything and how we view it and view ourselves with it.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And so how do we help these people? Okay. So anyways, 2/3 of all divorces in the United States right now, it's actually gone up a little bit from this, have pornography and sex addiction and infidelity as a major cause. And maybe something we can deal with in another question another time, but actually pornography statistic addiction is much higher in church people than in the secular world. Quite a bit higher. So, yeah, it took me a couple of years to figure out why that was, okay?